Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, October 5th, and this is the weekly market update. The disclaimer, anything that you hear or see on this podcast or video is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a registered financial advisor. I cannot give individual financial advice. What is discussed on here is for informational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence. It's your money. It's your responsibility. Okay, you've heard me go on and on about how I track global central banks and whether they're raising or lowering rates, who's raising and lowering rates. And again, this is a good chart that Bank of America put together. And it shows that September 24th was the biggest month of monetary easing since April 20th. You had 21. It was actually more what I tracked, but I think it was like 25 central banks cut rates in September. That's the most central banks cutting rates since the pandemic, when everybody was cutting rates and everybody was reliquefying the system. You'll also note that we are getting up to levels of rate cuts that we saw during the great financial crisis. So what I'm trying to tell you, what I've been saying and what I will continue to say, is that we are in a reliquefaction cycle around the world. Liquidity is moving upwards. We're showing that. You know that I discussed that. I firmly am in agreement with Stan Druckenmiller's view that liquidity and sentiment drives markets in the short and medium term. Obviously, earnings and corporate performance over many, many years will drive a stock price in the long term. But in the short term, year and a half, whatever, a lot of this is just fund flows and liquidity. So this is why I'm bullish. I have been tracking this. You can see it basically started picking up around August of last year, as I've discussed in the past, and we've just been moving higher. And now again, we have what I had said prior. We have all the big bazookas now are firing. Some people took after me last week because I called the Chinese interest rate cuts and the programs that they instituted to increase liquidity as a rocket or a missile taking off, not a bazooka. But the reason I said that is because it's not going to be a one and done. If they need more, it's kind of like when Mario Draghi, back during the financial crisis, when he was the ECB president, when he made the comment that the ECB would do whatever is required. And they really didn't have to do that much, because just that statement was enough for the market to kind of take over, right, and change the sentiment. So I do believe that the Chinese government will do what is required. They will inject enough liquidity. Now they have the cover now because the rest of the world's doing it. The U.S. is cutting rates, and so they'll be able to do more and more. And I suspect they'll do that. And I think that this, again, as I've talked about many, many times, this is going to create a huge wall of liquidity, like if you had a huge amount of water being dumped into the headwaters of the Mississippi up in Minnesota. Again, you don't know what's going to happen downstream, how that wall of water moving its way down. Just because if you dropped a huge snow melt up there, what's going to happen down in Vicksburg, Mississippi, or Memphis, or St. Louis, you don't know, right? Or Iowa, or whatever. As that water makes its way down there, then we see where that water, huge amount of water, where it overflows, what levees or whatever, where it's going to go. So it's the same thing with this liquidity. We don't even know exactly where it's going to go. We do know from prior cycles that various asset classes benefit. And I'm going to show a chart here, some work that Lynn Alden did recently that can give us some clues. It's pretty good work. So anyway, moving on, just reiterate, I thought this was a great visualization about what we've been discussing basically for over a year now here at on these videos. So I wanted to talk about these Fed cuts. Typically, as this chart shows, sharply declining U.S. interest rates usually means sharply declining profits. Why? Because the Fed's usually cutting rates because of economic weakness or recessions. But I've slowly, but I think, come around to the view that they're not necessarily cutting because of a recession, but they're cutting because of the fiscal situation the U.S. is in. That the debts that we have and the debts that we continue to accumulate in the U.S. At the federal level just are not going to be sustainable with rates where they were. So I think with interest rates now on the debt, or interest on the debt exceeding, the defense budget, and, just continuing to go skyrocket, they had no choice. And I thought, uh, I think we may, well, I think we're pretty much out of the whole look at what happened during previous cycles or looking at history. We're in like uncharted territory now. Some people have made the analogy to the United States is just running its monetary policy kind of like an emerging market, right? And that can be very volatile, and you don't know what's going on, right? So I think that they've got themselves boxed into a corner. Again, it doesn't matter who gets elected. We're on an unsustainable path that's eventually going to come to a reckoning. I don't know when it's going to, but you basically have supposedly one of the best economies right now, and we had a $1.9 trillion deficit in 2024 fiscal year. So we didn't even have a recession. We're running again at deficit spending levels that are at wartime levels. And so if you do have a recession, again, what's that deficit going to go to? $4-5 trillion a year or so. And it's just being added to the debt. We've talked about this before. So, this is what's happened in the past. You're typically cutting rates because of a recession, and in a recession, corporate profits go down, but we may be out of that scenario right now. And, if you're just going to spend 7%, 5, 7, 8, whatever it is, percent of GDP deficit spend, then I don't really see how you're going to have a recession. Now, you're going to have inflation. I think inflation is going to come back. We saw what happened this last week with like longer term bonds. Rates have went up. The market took rates up. So on this supposed good job report. So we're kind of in uncharted territory, but I think the path is laid out towards, regardless who gets in there, deficit spending, more money being spent that we don't have, and it's all going to be inflationary. And I think that leads us again to hard assets, tangible assets, things that can't be inflated away. So we've talked about this before. I mean, I think the world has now, the entire zeitgeist has changed. This is nothing new if you've been listening to this channel. Everybody's on board with nuclear power. I kind of find it amusing. I haven't seen this yet, but I'm waiting for it. But if you remember a month ago, when sentiment was horrible in uranium, everybody hated it. People were making declarations on FinTwit that they were done. Uranium sucks. You suck, John. Justin Huhn sucks. Everybody sucks that was advocating for higher uranium prices and this being a tremendous potential investment. And in the meantime, the fundamentals just kept getting more and more bullish. I mean, the bullishness is like it's the greatest I've ever seen in this industry. And yet people were, again, prepared to commit ritual seppuku because their crappy little Canadian junior uranium stock was down 50%. I mean, I've said this ad nauseum. I've been speculator in the junior resource stocks my entire life. It is nothing, even in a bull market, for some of these stocks to go down 50 to 75%, okay, in a year. And then round trip, and then, double from that, from that 50% decline. It happens all the time. This is why, I've transitioned from the juniors a long time ago into people that can actually produce uranium and cash flow, because you're now in the scenario, I think, or the mid innings of this bull market, where if you can produce uranium into a rising uranium price market, you're going to be able to cash flow, and that's where the attention and the money's going to go. Okay. And that's how the wealth is created. My portfolio is doing fine. I don't have any issues. When prices went down, I bought. I was very clear on that, what people should do. And so we're back. So I want to see what, as these people sneak back onto FinTwit. I didn't write the names down, but I have a mental note, and they will. This is how people are. If you're going to play in these markets, guys, you have to be able to have the EQ and the stomach. I mean, the fundamentals, when the fundamentals are tremendous and get better and the price cuts in half, you have to be a buyer. So, we're starting to see now term price move up. We're seeing Sput add now, buying uranium, selling more shares as the price went from a big discount to, positive now, which allows them to do the at the market offerings and cash up. So again, we keep seeing more and more news like this. All the big tech companies got together in Washington, D.C. recently with the government. I mean, this is what's going to happen. It's not going, we're still going to do renewables, but this is where the big push is coming, because the next growth initiative for these tech companies is this data and AI. Now, I don't know how they're going to make money on it. Just like I didn't know how people were going to make money during the internet, when pets.com and drcoop.com had these huge valuations and then went, bankrupt and disappeared. You're going to have a lot of that, right? When you have a new industry. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions, are going to be invested in this, and that the only way that these things can be powered is with nuclear power. Now, there will be an opportunity, I think, in the short term for natural gas generation also, but long term, I think you end up on nuclear. And this could be, hopefully we see this resurgence of this U.S. nuclear industry, build, operate industry, where a coalition comes together, public and private. I kind of said that's what I thought would happen, or I hoped would happen. And we're starting to see maybe the initial idea around that, because there's a lot of money involved here and a lot of big players. So it says here, Google CEO eyeing electricity from nuclear plants for its data centers, just like everybody else. And then we had this, Mark Nelson put this on X. Breaking in New York City, world's biggest banks pledge support for nuclear. Banks and funds totaling 14 trillion in assets have just signed an unprecedented statement in support of nuclear power. Then I have the Financial Times here, headline, world's biggest banks pledge support for nuclear power. You see the big names here. You see where this is going. I don't know how you can be negative on this business. Yeah, nothing more to say on that. And then we have, Japan making an announcement that they're going to keep restarting reactors. Japan to keep nuclear, boost renewables in its energy mix, new industry minister says. They have a new government there. Japan will continue safely restarting nuclear power plants and expand renewable energy usage under new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Despite his initial opposition to nuclear power, Ishiba now supports increased use of renewables and nuclear energy. They have to. I mean, once you get in there and you realize what's really going on, this is what has to happen. It says Japan plans to continually safely starting nuclear power plants and use as much renewable energy as possible, which isn't that much, because I lived in Japan and they don't have the open space like we had. It's very rocky, mountainous country. I've seen projects there, 25, 30 megawatts. That's not going to get it for an industrial, energy intensive country like Japan. They'll play around with it at the margins, but nuclear power is where they're going to end up. That's why they had a nuclear power industry, because the country has no natural resources and needed that dense power sources. They just don't have the open spaces that the U.S. has. So here's on the mongrel cat guy or person, whoever this is, on X. I follow them. They're kind of really up and coming with a lot of good industry news around uranium and nuclear power. I suggest you follow this person in your curation of people to follow on X. Had a tweet here. Data centers used 15 terawatt hours of power in 2023 and will triple in 2024. Wells Fargo sees a 550% increase by 2026 and another 1,150% increase by 2030. Beijing is the second largest data center market by total power. China has an eye-watering 260 gigawatts of nuclear power in the pipeline. And if you want to know why Kazatomprom isn't going to be exporting to the West anymore and why Russia is going to ban exports, is because, again, this is the geopolitical portion of what we've been talking about, of the global East and South breaking away from the hegemon. They have a large majority of the resources that are needed in the world in those countries. You don't want to do business, you want to sanction, you want to lord over all these people, 6 billion people, they're just going to turn their back and do their own thing. And so you're starting to see more and more turmoil at Kazatomprom. I also saw the suggestion it could be renationalized. Who knows? I don't like to, I mention these things, but I don't base my investment themes on that. But I do know that the Russians are considering banning critical elements to the West export, uranium, titanium, things like that, nickel. They're talking about that. I think they'll do it. Why not? Why wouldn't they? They have plenty of customers for, i.e. China and India, for their nuclear power industry. And so why not? And, until the West decides to be an equal partner instead of lording over everybody else around the world, then you're going to see more of that. But that's getting off track a little bit. The demand is there. The supply is not. That's been the story since I've been having this channel for like 5 years now. And I continue. It's just that simple. Barring a Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or some kind of nuclear accident, Fukushima again, this thing's going to keep doing what it's doing. And you just have to be patient. You're in a bull market, buy on dips. It's kind of like I said, all the activity during the summer, we had the sell off and everybody was, throwing the towel in. And I said, don't do that. Everybody's on vacation. This is a very small market of traders and fuel buyers. It's not like, any other commodity market. And people are on vacation. They're not paying attention because it's summer. After Labor Day, everybody's going to come back after they have the WNA. And just like we said, everything's cranking back up now. You're seeing deals being signed. You're seeing the term price move up, conversion price move up. You're seeing more activity going into the end of the year. And so, again, the problem with trying to trade this stuff is the emotional roller coaster you put yourself on. Because if you sell, you throw the towel in, and then you see it recovering and moving against you, you're sold out. Then you're over there, you notice it, and you're like, well, when should I buy back? And so you're saying, you see this initial move off where you sold and you don't want to buy above where you sold because you have these emotional blocks, okay, that keep you from doing that. And it just keeps moving higher. And you say, well, I'll wait. And then it runs away from you. The best thing to do is understand you're in a bull market. Look at charts of long-term bull markets that go on for many, many years, whatever industry. There are many dips. Your goal is to start at the lower left, catch the bull market as soon as you can, start at the lower left and end at the upper right, okay, on the chart, and ignore the pullbacks in between. Until the fundamentals change, until I see a whole bunch of things happen, I don't see how the supply-demand deficit in uranium and the whole supply chain for nuclear power plants gets solved without much higher prices and billions of dollars being invested. And we simply are not seeing that. And so people who have existing assets, mines that are running now or are going to turn back on, then, or close to being built, I wouldn't play with anything else. There's no reason to. They're going to capture cash flow, okay? And yes, eventually this problem gets solved because enough money will come in. But again, is that at $150 uranium, $200 uranium? People keep talking about building more reactors and are building more reactors, but no one's increasing the supply of uranium. So we'll see. Same thing in other commodities under investment. BHP, which is one of the largest mining companies in the world, projects copper demand to rise by 1 million tons annually until 2035. This is an article. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. BHP projects that global copper consumption will increase by an additional 1 million ton annually on average until 2035. This is largely due to the adoption of copper-intensive technologies, doubling the growth rate seen over the past 15 years. In a report released on Monday, the mining giant noted that global copper demand has historically grown at a compound annual rate of 3.1% over the last 75 years. However, the growth rate slowed to 1.9% in the 15 years leading up to 2021. Quote, as we look towards 2050, we foresee global copper demand increasing by 70% to reach 50 million tons annually. This will be driven by copper's role in both current and emerging technologies, as well as the world's decarbonization goals, unquote, notes BHP's Chief Commercial Officer, Rag Ud. So again, copper is right now around 460, I think is the last quote I saw. That's doing well. That's on the verge of breaking out if it hasn't broke out. And we're going to see moving higher. We're going to see copper moving higher over time because, again, as everybody electrifies, everybody builds out, not just here, but around the entire world. Okay, all this, the emerging markets don't stop growing. They don't, and as they grow, they need more copper inputs. They need more energy inputs. The energy that you're inputting, electricity, industrial facilities, upgrading buildings, building new buildings, upgrading housing, people needing more electricity, more copper, more transformers. I mean, this isn't really that hard to understand. And again, the investment hasn't happened. So we need a higher copper price. So I wanted to point this out. I've been saying this for a while. One of the things that I think is undervalued right now is platinum. I've been on a platinum purchase plan. Every month I purchase a certain amount of platinum. Don't at me about how to do it. I have people I buy it from, okay? I don't want to recommend them because I'm having some issues. They have great prices, but their customer service isn't the best, okay? But, you can buy platinum. There's plenty of places to buy it, okay? And you can buy it in gram bars. You can buy it in rounds. There's 1/10 ounce round. There's all kinds of different ways to do it with all kinds of different markups. You have to do your own work. But a lot of people on FinTwit were very bullish on platinum also, but they kept wanting to buy this miner in South Africa, okay, that I think keeps going down. Platinum is so cheap relative to gold. Platinum, guys, is something like 15 to 17 times more scarce in the Earth's crust than gold, yet is selling at basically almost a third of gold's price, okay? And so it's been in a bear market for a long time, and the production of platinum is in deficit or projected to be in deficit, and it comes from places that are not politically aligned with the U.S., i.e. South Africa, Russia, places like that, okay? And so I've been buying it. I don't need to go out and buy a platinum miner right now. Maybe down the road, but I just accumulate the metal, okay? Relative to gold, it's cheap. And now they're selling it at Costco. So, the people that are buying gold at Costco can look and say, well, I can buy almost 3 ounces of platinum for every ounce of gold I was buying. So, you're limited. Here's the headline. It says, Costco is now selling platinum bars. Will they glitter like gold? The Swiss-made platinum bar is being offered for sale at $1,089 only to Costco members who are limited to 5 units. So there you are. I mean, you could just take a small amount and buy, so much a month, whatever your budget, and just accumulate it and buy the metal. There's no reason to go out and try to speculate in various platinum stocks. I don't understand why you do that. This is so cheap relative to where it's been, relative to gold. You just buy the metal. Is it going to go up next week? I don't know. Is it going to go up next year? I don't know. Is it going to go up eventually? Yes. And it's a store of value. They are not making a whole lot more of it, and the places they are making it are not politically stable. So or are in conflict with the West. And I don't think internal combustion engines, the death of the internal combustion engine has been over-exaggerated. So here we have an announcement from the Russian government. They're going to start buying palladium, platinum, and silver. Russian Ministry of Finance proposes to keep spending on precious metals at 51.5 billion rubles in 2025 and to start buying palladium. This is from Bloomberg. The Russian Finance Ministry proposes to allocate 51.5 billion rubles in 2025 to buy precious metals and gemstones, according to the draft federal budget and the planning period of 2026 to 2027. The list of metals that are planned to be purchased includes platinum and palladium. The state previous metals repository, which built palladium reserves during the Soviet period, sold all of them by 2012, has not started buying the metal again until recently. The plans for budget allocations in 2025 correspond to the limit for precious metals and gemstone purchases in 2023 and 2024. The same amount will be allocated for these purposes in 26 and 27, although the previous plan was to allocate 38.9 billion rubles. The plan is to acquire refined gold, silver, platinum, and palladium to increase the share of highly liquid assets in the state fund. So there you go. That's what the United States should be doing. They should be like, to stimulate its domestic uranium industry, it should be buying large sums of uranium at higher than market prices. Okay. And then it can only be mined uranium. So say uranium is like, say the current term price is 80, the United States government should say, okay, we'll buy it at $100 a pound. We'll buy it at 25% premium to whatever like the 3-month rolling average or 6-month rolling average of the term price or something like that. Okay. But you can't go off and like buy uranium from Kazatomprom and then sell it. You have to produce it here. So produced uranium, do you think that would incentivize the price? So even as the price moved up, you would have this incentive pricing because you're going to need it here. You know, this country used to produce 40 million pounds of uranium a year at its peak back in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s. And last year, we barely produced hardly any uranium. Now it's coming back as these brownfield operations come back, like that are getting cranked up again. But you need significant billions and billions of dollars of investment to get back to significant uranium production. It's the same thing they should do with like the conversion price and all these, you know, UF6 pricing. They should pay above market rates, but you can't bring in foreign material. You have to produce it right here. That would incentivize people to do it. But, you know, that's just me thinking out loud. This was a slide from BlackRock. I follow this guy, Willem Middelkoop. I like following him on X. This was a slide, I believe, from the iShares. It's a BlackRock deal. It says, is BlackRock a gold and Bitcoin bug? They're talking about, they're showing this chart. You know, this chart gets shown, and people poo-poo it. This is basically the value of the dollar if you would have taken it back to 1913 when it was still gold backed, before we had the Federal Reserve, before we had all this crookery going on and inflation, that they stole your basically turned working people into slaves. So assume that the value of a dollar was $1 in 1913, and now it's, you know, in 2023, it's 3 cents, the equivalent. And so over the course of a century, this thing's down 97%. This is BlackRock saying that, not a conspiracy, not Peter Schiff, not some blogger. This is BlackRock. It says, and it's talking about Bitcoin possesses similar characteristics to that of other global monetary alternatives, and they show U.S. Treasuries, gold, and Bitcoin. I mean, if you thought that the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar has declined over the last 100 years drastically, wait for the next 10 years. What's going to happen? It doesn't matter who is the president or who's in the Congress. This is set in stone. Okay. And so you have to own things because they're going to inflate this. They're going to cause inflation's not going away. They have no other alternative. It's inflate or die at this point. And so you have to own things that they can't just make out of thin air like they make these currency units, i.e. the US dollar and basically all these other currencies around the world. I thought this was interesting. Again, this is BlackRock saying this, not some nut. So here's the GMO forward return forecasts. Again, emerging stocks are projected to return the best relative to US stocks because they're so overvalued historically. They're projected to actually underperform for the next 7 years. So this continues to be an area that I'm interested in, which is emerging markets, because I think that that's where the opportunity is. And here we have a chart Jesse Felder put on X, another Bank of America chart. EM equities, emerging market equities, at lowest valuation versus US equities since 1969. I mean, I don't know how to bang the drum any louder. People ask me, well, what's cheap now? Emerging market equities. Okay. What do I like? I already said I like platinum. I like emerging markets. What emerging markets do I like? Latin America, certain countries in Latin America. Okay. I'm tiptoeing back into Argentina. I'm not going to go whole. I'm Colombia. I like it. Okay. There's places there. I own some stocks at, an energy stock in Peru, largest oil producer in Peru. It's paying a 12% dividend. There's opportunity there. I like certain Central Asian countries because of what's happening there. The populations are actually growing in some of those countries, not shrinking. Okay. Economic reforms are happening. This is why I like the Republic of Georgia. They have a 2-decade history of economic reforms that are pro-market, and it's reflected in a growing economy, a dynamic economy, and I have a vehicle to take advantage of that that's trading at about a 50% of its net asset value. These are where the opportunities are. So, yes, I think the U.S., it's, again, if they're going to print money and we're in a liquidity cycle, stocks can get even more in the U.S. can get even more overvalued. That's certainly possible. But if we come back after all this money printing that we're seeing, and we have 5, 6, 7% inflation in a year or 18 months, they're going to have to raise rates again. Or, I mean, see, the problem is this, if the unemployment rate goes up 1%, okay, and your workforce is, let's say 100 million people in the US. I don't know what the exact, I'm just using this as an example. If you have 100 million people working and the unemployment rate goes up 1%, that affects 1 million people. But if the inflation rate goes up 7, 8, 9, 10%, that affects everybody living in America. And that's why inflation, they're so scared of inflation. Okay. But the Federal Reserve is politicized. Okay. And so they're enabling this deficit spending. They should let the bond market, they should let the bond market vigilantes, if they weren't buying debt, if they weren't monetizing the debt that they were doing over the last 10, 15 years, the lesson would have been learned by the Congress, because rates would have went up and crushed the US economy and forced them not to deficit spend like that, to get things under control. But the whole thing is rigged now, and it's not going to change. You're either going to get 80-year-old egomaniac as your president, who yesterday said that Israel should bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities. So much for anti-war. Or you're going to get a complete boob in charge that's being controlled by the bureaucracy, the mandarins, the pointy shoes. It doesn't matter. They're all going to spend money trying to build chip plants in Arizona and all these other boondoggles. And the boondoggles are going to get worse. So nobody's talking about fiscal restraint. Nobody's talking about taking spending from 7% of GDP to maybe even 3%. How about no deficit spending? You want to see what happens when real economic pain comes? Like Milei in Argentina, when he cut all spending, all deficit spending was cut, okay? And the economy declined, and 50% of the people there live in poverty. How do you think that would fly here with the people here in the US? Yeah, there will be social unrest. There will be a real insurrection. Okay. And so they're going to print or die. That's it. And it'll be somebody else's problem down the line when the inflation hits. Right now, keep the game going and we'll spin it. So I think you have to, again, look for things. So that means that, we've seen previous inflations in other countries and the stock markets can go up. But there's such a thing as real returns and nominal returns. And I don't have time to get into that right now. So this was an excellent chart. This would be, like Rick Rule has talked about, if you would have combined all of the Canadian junior mining stocks, if you merged them into Junior Explorco, one mining company, you would have had losses every year. And like in 2018, you would have had not over $9 billion in losses. In 2019, you would have had 6 billion, goes on and on. You would have had billions and billions of dollars losses. So these junior resource companies in general, as a whole, are net destroyers of capital because it's very speculative, very slippery, greasy industry where only, there are real players that are actually developing things and are legitimate. And there's a lot of posers and magicians and lifestyle CEOs. And so you have to be, if you're going to be in these resource companies, if you're going to be playing around with junior mining stocks, you have to be a stock picker extraordinaire. You have to know who the people are, the projects. Do they have the financing? Have they done this before? All these things go into it. And that's just not what people do. And this is why they're not successful monkeying around with the junior resource sector. But I thought this was interesting. This should tell you everything you need to know right here. If you took all of the junior mining companies, merged them into one company, it would be, look at this destruction of capital that would go on. That doesn't mean that it's not a place where tremendous wealth can be created. It is, but you have to really know what you're doing. And that's the trick, right? Nothing's easy. So we see this escalations continue in the Middle East between Iran and Israel and Hezbollah and all of these things. And I think it's interesting to note here that one of the major importers of Iranian crude is China. And you can see the increase in crude oil exports basically from a little bit more than 500,000 barrels a day in 2022 to close to 2 million barrels, 1.5 million barrels a day. And so I think that if Israel hits the oil facilities, export facilities, or what have you, I don't know how they're going to retaliate. I do think that Israel's got a big problem here. I mean, if they're going to keep escalating, there's no indication. I think they figured in their mind they're just going to go for it because this is their chance. And I don't think it's going to work. I think they're way out over their skis. And depending, I think that if this continues to escalate, the Israelis will be pushed in a position where in their mind it's going to justify the use of what they're going to consider limited nuclear response because they're not going to have another option. And that's when they're going to become a pariah state. I think we have a good chance of ending up there. I mean, I've listened to a lot of commentary. Everybody thinks everything's going swell. There's going to be all this regime change. This is their chance to just, take out everybody in the Middle East once and for all. I mean, this is crazy talk. Israel's a very tiny country, basically on the dole from the U.S. Without the U.S. state right behind it, it can't do anything against these countries. And people advocating for this nonsense are advocating for nuclear weapons to be used. And if Israel uses nuclear weapons, I would not want to be a Jewish person anywhere in the world. It's going to get really ugly for these people. Okay, the tenor has changed. They need to sit down. They need to understand the reality of the situation. They're a small country with a lot of people around them that hate them. They got to come up with a better plan than this tit for tat. I understand that there's this tit for tat, blood libel back and forth. It's just not going to end well for them because there's a lot more Arabs and people against them than for them. And as the baby boomers die off in the West, I'm seeing more. I mean, no one in the younger generations cares about all these legacy things that the boomers cared about to stand behind Israel. No one cares about it. And yes, you have the AIPAC lobby and all this. That's going to become less and less effective. People are just not going to want to support this. And if, God forbid, these people get to the point where they rationalize, well, we can use some small nuclear weapons or whatever to try to destroy Iran's capabilities. I mean, it's going to, like I said, it's going to become a pariah state. There's no way anybody in the world can stand behind that, even in the United States. And this thing is going to continue to escalate if they allow it. I don't see an off-ramp. I don't see anybody talking about an off-ramp. You know, the United States should tell Israel today, get it wrapped up ASAP, sit down, negotiate, start having negotiations for a Palestinian state, and or we're shutting off all support. And this thing, you know, that's it. But again, the lobby here is very strong, AIPAC and things like that. You know, I'm not going to get into that, but I mean, how's China going to react if in Russia and all these other places? I mean, the world's had enough of this. And if we go down that path, it's just not going to, and most people around the world don't care about this. They don't live there. That's the problem, right? There's civil war going on in Myanmar right now. No one's upset about it because they're not living there and living in the middle of it. And it's not on CNN constantly because there's no Myanmar, Rohingya, and there's various other ethnic groups lobbying in the U.S. Congress. It's just that simple. I mean, there's been ongoing ethnic cleansing and cannibalism and mass rapes in Congo, Rwanda border areas for 2 decades or going back to the 60s. Nobody cares. Now, I'm not saying these are good things or we shouldn't care about them, but we don't have the ability to fix this stuff. We're in a different world now. And I don't think China is going to take very good, not going to be very happy if we see, you know, supposedly, you know, Monday is the anniversary of that attack by Hamas where all those Israeli citizens were killed. I don't know. It seems like a lot of people in the Middle East on both sides like dates. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if they have this retaliatory strike, you know, if that happens on the 7th. And I think it's another holiday for a Jewish holiday. I'm not sure. But regardless, you start getting into this tit for tat escalation. You know, if they knock out the oil facilities, oil's fungible, it has to be bought somewhere. What does Iran do then? What do the Arab states do? Does somebody finally say, you know what? The West needs to really clamp down on its support on Israel. We need to have another embargo. I mean, anything's possible. And does the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, really want oil prices spiking 4 weeks? You know, if you have an attack on these oil facilities and the price of oil goes to 100, 120, $130, who knows where, how high it could go, okay? Right before the election, and gas is $5.50, $6 a gallon. I mean, that would not be good. And so, yes, these are considerations. So, again, I don't know what's going to happen. I just look at what the possibilities are and probabilities. There's not a zero chance that nothing happens. There's some chance, and it's one of these events as this thing escalates. You know, I think that the leadership, the new president in Iran, didn't really want to retaliate, and the military, the IRGC, had to go to the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, and lobby him to allow for the retaliatory strike. And so, you know, there's a lot involved going on behind the scenes, even in Israel, we have no idea about. But, you know, I think that, again, we're on this escalator, tit for tat. I don't see anybody saying, okay, that's enough. We need to like, that's enough. Everybody did their tit for tat. Let's de-escalate this. I don't see that. So there's potential for a lot of bad things to happen. So this is a George Orwell quote. I mean, I learned this a long time ago. Most people don't agree with me that I think this whole thing's a scam. It's just a way to get money. The Cold War was over in 1991. I was naive then. The Scorpions sang that song when the Berlin Wall came down. You know, everybody was excited. We were going to beat the swords and the plowshares, and people were writing columns and investment about look at all this defense money that we can spend. We don't have to waste on defense anymore. We can just, it's a racket, man. It's just another racket, a con. Okay. They have to invent these boogeymen to keep the money flowing. And the Congress is behind it because it's the military industrial congressional complex, right? The Congress appropriates money to the defense budget. Money goes to the defense contractors. The defense contractors take a certain amount of that money and recycle it into campaign contributions. That's why I call it the military industrial congressional complex, because they're all in on it. And, you know, vote harder. People are like, well, we need to stop this. You know, we need to vote the right people. We need to vote these people out. Good luck. Bobby Kennedy couldn't even get on any. You saw what happened. The whole system's rigged. That's not the way forward. Okay. And I don't have time to get in. I've mentioned it before a couple times, you know, what I think is the way forward, but people want instantaneous results. They think they can vote their way out of this. You're not going to vote your way out. You're in a declining empire. Okay. It's going to get uglier and uglier and harder, and people are going to become poorer and poorer. And you're going to see just continue strip mining of the working people and middle class of this country for the benefit of the wealthy. The poor will be given enough bread so they don't riot. And the middle class, the working people, the people that keep everything going are going to get more put into the Star Wars trash compactor with the walls closing in on them year after year. It's like, why is this happening? Let's vote for this guy. He'll fix it. It's not how it's going to work. So what does Orwell say? The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. That's right, because that's where the grift is. That's where the grift is. $300 billion to Ukraine, and they're losing the war. They're going to lose the war. Then what? What's NATO going to do? Do we need NATO? What's the EU going to do? You know, I've said this before, the EU is not going to exist in 10 to 20 years as a political entity. It's going to fly apart. You already see what's happening, the rise of left-wing and right-wing parties that are challenging this liberal center, this neocon center. People have had enough. The United States won't exist as a political entity, and it won't be because people vote for it. It'll be because it's not financially viable anymore, and it'll fly apart at the seams. It's a Rube Goldberg operation that's just going to collapse on itself, like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed because of all of the internal contradictions of a system that made no economic or logical sense. It's the same thing that the EU and the US have become. And so war is there for several things: to distract the population, to get the nationalism and jingoism going up, you know, to get people aligned. You know, war is the defining organizing principle of societies. Somebody said that. So, you know, it's kind of like Orwell wrote about, you know, was it Oceania and whatever, the two factions? You should see it now. You see the BRICS countries, the global South and East, that have had enough of this. And again, I'm not saying that that's a better system or those are better countries or what have you. I'm just telling you what's happening. Their economic strength is increasing. Everything's moving. The gold, the money, the power is moving from west to east. I would acknowledge that and deal with that decline rather than, you know, trying to hold on with my fingertips and doing the whole, you know, I think Doug Casey said you can either have a controlled demolition or you can just let the building fall over, and, you know, that creates more damage. So that's it. So this is a tweet. I mean, for many years, I didn't really care for Elon Musk. I thought he was a charlatan. I definitely think he's a great marketer. He's kind of a P.T. Barnum type guy as far as but I have to give the guy credit. He built several companies that are worth billions of dollars. Do I agree with him on everything? No, but there's something there. And then when he took over Twitter, it's not 100% where everybody wants it, but there's a lot of stuff on there that wasn't on there, that you couldn't talk about a couple of years ago. And so he's been very good about this. And I think that he's looked at it, and a lot of other like tech billionaire people can see what's happening now. And the sands are shifting, but it may be too late. I can tell you right now that if the Democrats win this election, you can forget about they're going to shut this whole thing down, and they're going to be able to do it. They're going to have the mandate. We have to save democracy. We have to get rid of misinformation. You heard AOC the other day. Well, who's going to be the arbiter of what's misinformation? Well, whoever's in power. As Lenin said, would you rather be the hammer or the anvil? I'd rather be the hammer. The hammer gets to beat on the anvil. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to clamp down on Twitter and all these things are going to get clamped down on. Rumble, the whole shebang. It's just that simple. There's going to be nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run anymore, folks. All the gazelles are getting eaten. There's only a few of us left. Your strategy of being the last gazelle at the watering hole that the crocodiles are going to eat, you're coming to a decision point very quickly. And again, it doesn't matter who gets elected because you're in a declining empire. So the best thing that could happen is that we financially collapse and this United States as a political entity, and then we have several countries or many countries on this continent. That would be the best, but that's probably not what's going to happen immediately. There's going to be a lot of crackdowns as they try to hold this thing together. They're certainly not going to let people. They just passed a law in the UK, for example, I saw the other day, or proposing to pass it because they were debating it on one of the talk shows there, that if you even discuss about how bad the financial conditions are in the UK, that could be considered disinformation. How dare you talk about an alternative to, money printing and, strip mining by the elites. Yeah, this is where it's heading. They're just not going to allow any dissent. I've said it before. The West is going to it's like the reverse of turning a pillowcase inside out, where the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries, we had this Iron Curtain, and there was all this information they couldn't have information there. You had secret police, people were put in gulags, the whole stuff. And now we're going to flip the script, and the West is going to that way as these people try to hold on to power in a system that is riddled, has no foundation. And so what does Elon say? He says, yes, they are literally using your tax dollars to import voters and disenfranchise you. It is happening right in front of your eyes. And FEMA used up its budget ferrying illegals into the country instead of saving American lives. Treason. He's responding to this person, Jason DeBolt. The Democrats are literally charging Americans billions of dollars to completely disenfranchise us and create single-party authoritarian rule like in California. That's exactly what's happening. But if you say it, you're a racist, you're a conspiracy theorist. I was listening to Harmeet Dillon the other day, and I already knew this, but she explained it very simply. There's no reason to do election fraud in New York State or California because they're one-party states already, okay? There's only a few states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, okay, that decide the election. And in those states, there's only a few counties that decide the election, okay? That's what we're down to now. That's how close it is. That's how divided the country is, where maybe a dozen or 15 counties literally decide the election, okay? And so what you see is somebody did this. I wish I would have saved it. That's where they're taking all the illegals to these places. So once Kamala gets in there and she has a Congress, she more than likely will have a Congress eventually that's predominantly Democrat. They're going to legalize all these people. Then they can vote. Then it's over. That's what they did in California. It's over. Okay? And you can put a nail in it. And even if you get Trump in there, you just stave it off for 4 years because again, I'm going to deport all these people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Okay, it's easy to get rid of the Venezuelan gang members. Nobody's opposed to that. You're not going to deport 15 million people. Again, the American people won't put up with the violence required to do that. It can be done. It'll be very ugly, and people won't put up with it because the news media will just have it in your face all day long. Little 3-year-old Guatemalan girl clinging to her father as they're dragging him to the Border Patrol van. It's just not going to happen. It's over. It's not black pill, it's reality. And so you need to look for another way forward instead of thinking you can sit on your butt and do absolutely nothing and live your life for your pleasure and just go vote every 4 years and it'll all be great. And somebody will come down and kiss your life and make it all good again. This is how little children think, not how real men think. So Elon, he's invested heavily in making sure that Mr. Trump gets elected, because if he doesn't, that's it for him. Remember when he was the darling of the left? SpaceX. I mean, I see a lot of people turning against him now because, he's an advocate for free speech now. He sees the light. He sees what's going on. And he also sees that it's curtains for him, or he's going to have to flip back over to that side. I don't know. But this is what they're doing. And people don't want to acknowledge it, right? It's a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. This is a well thought out, excellent plan. This is exactly what I would do if I was on that side. I would find out all the counties that are right on the verge of turning. I would import third world people there, set them up in your face. I don't care because you're not going to do anything about it anyways. And then once I get a Congress and a president, I would have a comprehensive immigration bill and naturalize all of them. And then they can vote. Then it's done. You're cooked. It's over. It's an excellent plan. It's well thought out. It's devious. It's diabolical. It's evil, but it's well thought out, and it's probably going to work. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. This was set in motion decades ago, and nobody did anything. I remember Tom Tancredo, who's a congressman from Colorado. He talked about this. This was his issue. Illegal immigration, the changing demography, what it would lead to. He was called every name in the book: neo-Nazi, racist, xenophobe, blah, 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 blah. So there you go. Now we're at that critical point. This is what's happening. But I'm going to go out and vote. They'll just cheat. That's what they did last time. It doesn't take much. Again, it's only a few counties they need to flip, and it's over. All right. That's it. I mean, you got to be, this is why I say, if you are, and believe me, there's people listening to this that are fine with this. That's great. I'm not going to change your mind, but I'm telling everybody that if you think your life is going to be the same, it's not. Your life is going to descend into, you're going to have inflation. You're going to have things breaking down. You're not going to have this. It's not going to be the same. These people are coming from places that never had civilization. Doesn't that tell you something? That's not racist. That's an observation. If I wanted to live in Haiti, I'd move to Haiti. No one wants to live there because it's a mess. Why? Because it's full of Haitians. I mean, that's the reality. And so you bring them here, you give them money, you get them naturalized, they'll vote Democratic. You just flip that county, it's all over. Next, rinse and repeat, and nobody's going to do anything about it. It's past the point of no return. So there you go. All right, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you next week. Appreciate it. Hard assets, tangible assets, that's where you got to go. If you have the ability, look for a bolt hole outside of the West. You got to start thinking about that. If you're younger, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of the West. It's not going to be tenable long term. All right. Talk to you next week.